She's got the perfect family, my sister snapped before stealing my 3-year-old son from the mall. 10 years later, the police revealed her twisted motive. The room was softly lit by the morning sun streaming in through the window as I awoke. Mornings like these, serene and calm, are a common occurrence in our suburban San Francisco home. David, my husband, was already stirring near the bed. He's always up before I am. "Good morning, Catherine," he murmured. I returned his gentle greeting, my vision still adjusting as I saw him already suited up, knotting his tie in the mirror. He always adopts this habit since he works as an engineer at a tech company. "Morning, you're up early again today," I said. I got out of bed and pulled back the curtains. Outside, I saw the well-kept houses and tidy gardens all lined up perfectly. Each time I gaze at this place, I feel sure that we did the right thing when we decided to live here. My name is Catherine Miller, and I am 38 years old. I'm employed as a project manager at a large architectural firm. People often comment on my long blonde hair, as well as what they consider my intelligent features. Maybe my attention to detail and dedication to my work have been influenced by the path I took to get where I am now. As I made breakfast, my mind was already going over my plans for the day. David has to leave early for the office, which isn't the case for me because I mostly work from home. When he was seated at the table, I put his usual breakfast down, toast, scrambled eggs, and a cup of black coffee. "I might be home a little later tonight. Deadlines are approaching." "I understand," I replied. "I have online meetings all day too, so I won't be cooking anything too elaborate for dinner." Our everyday life is typically filled with laid-back chats over the morning meal. After 5 years of being married, this way of living simply evolved naturally. My twin sister, Lauren, is a self-employed web designer. We look exactly alike, and folks always assume we're the same person when we first meet. However, our personalities couldn't be more different. I'm a stickler for detail and highly organized, but Lauren is a free spirit, possessing an artistic flair. Even though we're total opposites, we remain close sisters, and we make an effort to share dinner together several times a month. "Catherine, I'm going to have to cancel our weekend plans for dinner. I have a meeting with a new client that popped up. That message from Lauren showed up last week. She's currently unattached and putting all her focus into her job. Occasionally, I feel a little worried about her somewhat solitary demeanor, but that's the life she has selected for herself. Perhaps I should cease overthinking things. My relationship with my mother-in-law, Margaret Miller, is actually pretty positive. Coming from a wealthy family, she has moments where she can be a bit rigid, but she's also a genuinely kind individual who cherishes her family. We always make sure to be present for significant events, such as weddings, anniversaries, and birthdays. "Catherine, your cooking has really improved." Those words from my mother-in-law at last month's dinner gathering brought me considerable joy. What was once a strained relationship between us has, fortunately, developed into one of peace. I first met David at a get-together arranged by a shared friend. I was instantly attracted to his kind personality and the importance he placed on his family. We got married. We got married a year after we first met, and 3 years into our marriage, we were given our son Matthew. I spend most of my daylight hours completely absorbed in my career. I oversee architectural projects and hold virtual meetings with my colleagues, all from the office located within my house. My midday meal is typically a solitary affair, although occasionally I'll eat sandwiches in the backyard with my neighbor Sarah. Lately, Matthew's school has kept me constantly occupied. Knowing what you do, Catherine, pushes me to stay on track. Chatting with Sarah always gives me a nice feeling. She's got 2 children and is really active in the PTA. My spouse and I enjoy calm dinners together in the evenings. We'll sometimes share a glass of wine and catch up on what happened during the day. Weekends are reserved for gardening and reading, which are the things I love to do. We also occasionally host get-togethers for our local friends. The roses we put in the ground a little while back are thriving. The weekend is really the best for gardening. Being able to touch the earth and watch the plants flourish brings me a sense of serenity. David's first wife passed away 8 years prior from an illness. Learning about this, I hoped I could assist him with his emotional recovery. Presently, we've formed a bond where we grasp and bolster each other. "I'm so happy I found you." David occasionally says these words to me. Each time, I feel our connection growing stronger. I have this feeling that these tranquil days would last for all eternity. I never could have predicted my life would take such a turn. That particular day felt just like any other spring day. The date was May 15, 2014, a Thursday. I typically work from home, but that specific day I had an unexpected afternoon off. I drove to a mall in the San Francisco suburbs to get Matthew's kindergarten uniform. "Mom, can I go play in the play area after this?" Matthew inquired with a hopeful look after we selected his uniform in the kids' clothes section. Because he's usually so well-behaved, I happily said yes. The children's play area was close by, equipped with security cameras and staff always on duty. "Just a half hour, okay? Mom will do some other shopping while you're there," I told him. Matthew gave a happy nod and dashed towards the kids' play area. I couldn't have guessed that would be the last time I'd see him run off like that. Once I'd finished buying some things at a nearby stationery shop, I hurried back before the agreed-upon 30 minutes were up and instantly realized something was amiss. Matthew wasn't inside the play area. "Excuse me, have you seen a little boy wearing a blue t-shirt?" I asked. Even when I questioned the staff, they didn't seem to know anything. My heart began to pound. Trying to stay composed, I began to search the nearby stores individually. "Matthew," I called, but there was no answer. As panic started to consume me, I asked for help from the security personnel. Soon, an announcement went out over the mall's intercom system, and several security guards began looking for him. "We need to contact the police right away." While I was agreeing with the head of security, I was already dialing David with shaking hands. Even though he was in a meeting, he came running over right away. "We'll find him. Try to stay calm," he said. Even though David sounded calm, I could see the anxiety in his expression. When the cops got there, a comprehensive search kicked off. They examined the security camera recordings and talked to everyone who'd seen anything, but nothing concrete turned up. That night, it was on the local news broadcasts. The news report read, "3-year-old missing from San Francisco shopping center," and it was on the screen. A few days later, they expanded the search to the entire state. Helicopters and unmanned aerial vehicles were utilized for a giant search. The hashtag #FindMatthew was everywhere on social media, and lots of people helped supply information. Nevertheless, as time ticked away, the leads that seemed hopeful slowly lessened. 1 month went by, then half a year, then a full year. The police investigation had come to a standstill. Wasn't there anything we could possibly do? That question I would ask David every single night. We ended up hiring private detectives and pursued our own searches. Each year, on the yearly date of when Matthew disappeared, we would have press conferences, hoping someone could share some information. Things became drastically different for me. I would spend my days totally absorbed in my job, trying to avoid the whole situation. My husband and I spoke a lot less. Despite everything, David was always there for me. He would hold my hand without saying anything and cry alongside me. "You really need to get some rest." Every time my sister, Lauren, would tell me this, I would shake my head no. Quitting felt like I was giving up on Matthew completely. I continued to put up Matthew's pictures online pretty often, along with images showing what he might look like as he got older. Perhaps someone will recognize him. I just couldn't relinquish that tiny speck of optimism. A decade created a new routine for us. Each sunrise, we place a plate at the table for Matthew. When his birthday rolls around, we always bake a cake. It might be a depressing thing, but it became a meaningful tradition for our family. "Catherine, you've been so resilient." My mother-in-law Margaret said this to me one day. Her tone was soft, which wasn't like her personality at all. The days alternated between feeling hopeful and hopeless. Still, we absolutely had to keep going. We made new connections with people and discovered different types of joy. But deep down, the image from that day was seared in our minds. Things changed slowly but inevitably. Weekend get-togethers at home diminished, substituted with volunteer work. I worked in support groups, helping families of missing kids. Meeting other parents who knew what I was going through gave me a fresh sense of purpose. "Your actions are inspiring so much hope in people." Jane, the person in charge of the support group, told me this. She too was a mother who lost her daughter 15 years ago. By sharing our heartache and offering each other support, we could slowly inch forward. Yet the time of year changing was particularly difficult. It was the season of cherry blossoms, which Matthew loved. Passing by his old kindergarten would bring back recollections of holding his little hand. From time to time, I would see children on the sidewalk and try to envision what Matthew would look like at his current age. The monthly updates from the private detectives always contained the identical information. There were no new developments. The anticipation for those reports was just a constant element of our existence. When I reflect on it now, that decade seems like both an eternity and a blink of an eye. There's no way to reclaim the years that have passed. However, no one could have predicted the actual truth would surface in the manner it did. That evening was unfolding peacefully, as was the norm. It was past 11, and I was getting prepared to go to sleep. David had texted that he'd be working late, so I was unwinding by myself in the living room. The soft moonlight was softly lighting up the neighborhood outside my window. All of a sudden, the doorbell sounded. I paused briefly, wondering who it could be at that late hour. On the security monitor, I saw 2 men wearing dark blue uniforms. They were police officers. My heart began to pound in my chest. A police visit so late at night, something must be seriously wrong. "Do you have a few minutes?" "Yes, what's going on?" As I opened the door, the older officer started to speak in a calm voice. His face didn't display any visible concern, but my own nervousness escalated. "Do you know this boy?" The photo the officer held out showed a young boy, maybe 13 years old. He had dark, shiny hair, strong eyebrows, and those eyes. I immediately knew the eyes, though they were just echoes from the past. My hands started to tremble. "That's my son, but he was supposed to have died 10 years ago." The words came out in a shaky whisper. The boy in the photo was without question Matthew, but that was an impossible. My son vanished a decade ago. Just when I'd finally started to believe he was lost to me forever, this unbelievable thing occurred. "He's still with us, and he's eager to see you." The officer's statement slammed me with a jolt of harsh truth. My legs almost buckled beneath me, but the younger officer quickly helped me get to the couch. "What exactly are you saying?" With a perplexed expression, the older officer started to clarify the details. In a small town located in Montana, a new teacher had become suspicious. There were some discrepancies with the paperwork transferring students, and the lady claiming to be the child's mother was acting strangely. As the local police started looking into the teacher's report, connections to the kidnapping from 10 years ago began to surface. The DNA test results are in. There's absolutely no doubt about it. I found myself sobbing while I held onto the picture. I immediately called David, and he dropped what he was doing and hurried back. The police set up a meeting for us to see our son at the police station at 9 a.m. the next day. That night, both David and I couldn't get any rest. A decade of missing him, our grown son, and why he was suddenly found. Though we had so many unanswered questions, the reality that our son was alive left us utterly silent. By dawn, the news people had already started to gather around the station. The revival of a 10-year-old kidnapping case was causing a major stir. As we were brought into the meeting room at the police station, my heart felt like it would leap out of my chest. The door opened and a young man stepped inside. "Mom." When I heard his voice, I couldn't help but burst into tears. There he was, my boy. Even though he was a lot bigger, I could still see hints of the way he looked when he was small. However, the worry I saw in his eyes was exactly the same as it was when he was just 3 years old. Matthew, I really wanted to hug him. A decade had created this unseen barrier between us. He probably has his own difficult feelings about the situation, too. We have to be careful, moving slowly. "Can I sit down?" Matthew gave a little nod, and we settled in, sitting across the table from each other. David stayed back observing. It was thoughtful of him to give us this time together. "How are you doing?" It was probably a simple question, but honestly I didn't know how to get past the 10 years we'd been apart. "Good." His voice was quiet, a little shaky. "I went to school every day. Hearing that made my heart ache. School. My son's precious days that I wasn't there for. Who helped him with his schoolwork, who applauded at his games, who wiped away tears at his graduations. These stolen moments, I could almost feel them cutting into me. Your father wants to say hello, too." I looked over at David. He came over and sat in the chair beside Matthew. "Hi, Matthew." David's voice was trembling as well. Our son gazed at his father, and I saw him give a weak smile. He seemed like he was trying to remember something from a long time ago. I remember from pictures. The same face Mom showed me. Hearing that, David and I looked at each other. Someone had been showing our son pictures of us. There must be something really important going on here. I knew I shouldn't dwell on that revelation at this instant. I was so glad to see Matthew. I really attempted to offer a smile. However, my voice just wouldn't cooperate. My tears continued streaming down my face. "I'm so sorry," I heard Matthew whisper. "I couldn't get away." "Because it's fine," I interjected quickly. "You did nothing wrong," I repeated. The meeting was scheduled for half an hour. That wasn't nearly long enough. Still, this was just the start of things. From this moment forward, we would have to slowly begin to get back the time we had lost. Considering Matthew needed mental health assistance, the police suggested a gradual reunion plan, with meetings at specified times every day, and that we slowly rebuild our connection while getting counseling from professionals. It might require us to be patient. Nonetheless, for us, having waited a decade, even this amount of time felt so important. As we walked out of the room, Matthew quietly asked, "Can we get together again?" "Absolutely, I guarantee it." I felt certain I could keep that assurance this time. Outside the police station, photographers waiting outside snapped pictures, yet even that chaos seemed so far away now. I was just overwhelmed with happiness about this incredible reunion and the excitement for the new life that was about to commence. Heading home in the car, David quietly said, "We have the opportunity to start anew as a family." I didn't say anything but simply nodded. In truth, this was not an ending, but a true fresh start. A week after we were reunited with our son, the truth finally surfaced. As we continued our regular appointments at the police station, Matthew was slowly becoming more open with us. That particular day, we were enjoying a quiet time in the conference room. Then the atmosphere instantly shifted when a group of police officers rushed into the room. It seems a major breakthrough had occurred. The detective's face, typically so composed, was now strained. "They've taken your sister into custody, Lauren Miller." When those words reached my ears, everything seemed to just freeze. Lauren, my twin sister. I so desperately wished I could convince myself it was all some error. I wished it was a mistake. However, Matthew's face gave everything away. He was staring at the floor, shaking just a little bit. "Aunt Lauren, I am so sorry." With those simple words, everything I knew crumbled around me. It was Lauren, the woman who snatched my son from the mall a decade ago, the woman who was essentially me. That's why Matthew went with her without any hesitation. During the questioning process, the entire truth emerged. On that day, Lauren was wearing my clothes, and she had parked a Toyota minivan in the parking lot, which she had set up beforehand. Surveillance cameras located within the children's clothing department caught her walking toward the play area, mimicking my exact appearance. "Mom's here," she said. Upon hearing those words, my 3-year-old son grabbed her hand immediately without any question. Even his tears could be chalked up to a weary child's discontent. It was an impeccably crafted plan. Lauren had spent a decade orchestrating her new life with my boy. The initial 2 years they spent in Portland, surrounded by artists, staying out of sight in a neighborhood where homeschooling was the norm. For the next 3 years, I resided in the Boise, Idaho suburbs where I could have some peace and quiet. Then, for the following 5 years, I made my home in the beautiful, secluded area of Missoula, Montana, really trying to avoid interacting with others as much as possible. Her reason for all of this was a warped fixation on me and payback. When she was being questioned, Lauren spilled all the details. Thomas had ended their engagement just 8 weeks before. It was because he'd compared her to me. "Why can't you live like your sister?" he'd said. "She's got the perfect family." Those words cut her deeply, but that was just the beginning. As far back as I can remember, our parents had, without realizing it, always compared us. It was always about grades, clubs, and who had the most friends. Everything Lauren did was seen in the shadow of her sister, Catherine. Then I got married, had kids, and advanced in my career. While everyone else thought I had the perfect life, she felt resentment boiling up inside. What had Matthew been doing for those 10 years? Lauren had been constantly showing him my pictures, telling him, "This is your real mother." But then she'd add, "We can't be together right now." My young son had to believe that explanation. Aunt Lauren was actually nice, Matthew told the authorities, but sometimes she would cry, especially around my birthday. Every year on his special day, my son was shown pictures of us and stories about his actual family. However, it was just the surface of a much bigger problem. There was that deep-seated sense of being less than from when we were kids. She'd been constantly compared to me during all those school years. My sister's heart had been ravaged by a combination of parental pressures and envy of what she perceived as my ideal existence. I also wanted to find joy in life. The detective's words, relayed to me during the interrogation, left me completely stunned. I hadn't seen the depth of my sister's pain at all. For a decade, Lauren had traveled across 3 states, Oregon, Idaho, and Montana, with my son. She used her freelance web design work as a cover, carefully living to avoid leaving a digital footprint. The court proceedings started. In the courtroom, I saw my sister for the first time. She looked gaunt and her eyes held no spark. The self-assured look she once possessed had vanished, replaced by palpable remorse. When she saw me looking at her, she parted her lips just a bit. "Catherine, I'm so sorry, I just wanted to be a mom like you." Hearing those words was overwhelming. I felt anger, grief, and a bizarre sense of freedom all at once, and the painful truth that I'd failed to see my sister's struggles. Everything was a complete jumble. During the trial, it became clear that Lauren's actions were both carefully planned and driven by mental instability. She hadn't hurt or ignored my son in any way. In fact, she had given him excessive love. His performance in school was fantastic, and they had no problems with their neighbors. Yet the psychological assessment showed that this was all compulsive behavior aimed at her playing the part of the perfect mother. To me, Matthew was truly my son, Lauren confessed through tears on the stand. However, it was all a facade of joy constructed on deceit. David stood by me the whole way. He went with me to the courthouse and offered his support when I was overcome with sadness. Most importantly, he dedicated himself to taking care of Matthew. "She always showed me your photos," Matthew stated one afternoon. "She told me you were my true mom, yet somehow it felt off." The prison sentence was a quarter of a century. Despite some factors that lessened the severity of her actions, the severity of a planned kidnapping was a significant consideration. As Lauren departed the courtroom, she turned back to look at us one last time. Tears of regret shimmered in her eyes. Gradually, our life afterwards slowly began to transform. Matthew got help from professionals while slowly increasing his time spent with family. We carefully made preparations for his school transfer. Living together just yet seemed premature. The counselor recommended it. Truthfully, a decade wasn't easily overcome, but we had time. On the weekends, we loved going on picnics in the park or catching a movie. Sometimes we just sat silently together, simply spending time together. These little everyday moments formed our new connections. "Mom, will you read my favorite book to me?" Matthew asked one day. It was the first time he'd asked for a one-on-one activity on his own. I sat down right next to him, enjoying the happiness of the moment. A year later, Matthew officially elected to live with us. We got a room ready for him with space for all the memories of 10 years. From now on, let's make new memories together. We all silently agreed with David's words. Time sometimes feels like it mends wounds, but other times it tests us. However, there's no doubt that we're progressing. Those past 10 years are gone and we won't get them back. Nevertheless, the future stretching out before us is ours to shape. My husband's mother, Margaret, was overjoyed by her grandson's arrival, completely thrilled by it. The combination of her love and her discipline has made our family relationships even stronger. Lately, when I see the sunlight coming in through the window, it appears to shine with more intensity. Every single dawn presents us with fresh possibilities. After all, it's like our journey is starting all over.